Today we interviewed Johanna Nels. She is responsible for the implementation of the Istanbul Convention at the Council of Europe. We spoke about the challenges to make the Istanbul Convention more widely known to the great public, the budget for promoting women's rights and build awareness of the Istanbul Convention, and how many countries have ratified it and how many more are they working on to have full adoption in 2022. Thank you for watching the UN Brief, and don't forget to subscribe. Johanna Niels, you are in charge of the office that takes care of the implementation of the Istanbul Convention at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with the UN Brief.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So, what are the challenges nowadays to make the Istanbul Convention more widely known? Because when I talk to people, even people who work in lawyers, they are not aware of what it means.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the Istanbul Convention is still a rather recent human rights treaty that seeks to protect to protect women and girls from violence and to prevent such violence and to prosecute the perpetrators. So this indeed is rather new. It was open for signatures 10 years ago. It entered into force 8 years ago, and the implementation in the state parties is, of course, ongoing. But it's true that that doesn't mean that every single legal professional in a state party would know the details of the convention. But it is, of course, an instrument that has really been considered to be very innovative and far-reaching. So in many circles among the expert stakeholders, it is very, very widely known, and it is being used to lobby for change, for advocacy, and also to slowly change the implementation and how things are being handled on the ground. The challenges are, of course, those of making the convention and its standards widely known through training and through general awareness raising. But here, for example, the Council of Europe runs online training courses for legal professionals, specifically on the Istanbul Convention, on the standards that it offers, and has recently added a training course for law enforcement staff so that anyone in law enforcement agencies can actually learn about the standards on violence against women. So there are many, many different types of activities that are being carried out to do exactly what you suggested, to make sure that at the level of the individual professionals, the standards of the Istanbul Convention become known.
And what is your budget for promotion of women's rights and to build awareness of the Istanbul Convention among country parties of the convention?
So I head the Violence Against Women division, which is in fact the division in the Council of Europe that looks after the monitoring mechanism of the Istanbul Convention. And that is the independent group of experts called GREVIO and the Committee of the Parties. So my budget covers that, and that means we run evaluation procedures in the 35 state parties. We carry out the evaluation visits, and we ensure that the work of the two bodies that make up the monitoring mechanism can be carried out so that the country-specific reports by Grevio, for example, that they are published and available to offer guidance to the state parties. In addition to my team, there are many other parts of the organization as such that promote women's rights and that raise awareness of the Istanbul Convention. And that is mainly the colleagues who look after the cooperation projects and capacity building work. We have a whole team that runs cooperation projects in many different countries. Then there's also standard setting work that is done through intergovernmental committees of the Council of Europe, where the 47 member states come together, and promotion of women's rights standards is also done through that. Um, that leg, but also the adoption of new standards is also being assured through that leg. Then there's, of course, also the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, where we have parliamentarians who actually formed a network to promote the standards against violence against women, and it's a network called um, Women Free from Violence. And so there are many, many different parts of the organization who all together really help to promote women's rights and to raise awareness of the standards of the Istanbul Convention, both in state parties, but also among those who are yet to become state parties.
And how many countries have ratified it, and how many more are you working with to have full adoption during this year, the 2022?
Well, we currently have 35 state parties to the Istanbul Convention, with Moldova being the most recent country to have ratified the Istanbul Convention, and it will enter into force in that country in May. We also have, for example, Israel as an observer, as a non-state party that has actually, or a non-member state that has actually asked to be invited to accede to the Istanbul Convention. And we also have, for example, Kosovo, where the authorities have or are implementing the standards of the Istanbul Convention and are in fact also being assessed as to their level of implementation. So these are the most recent developments on that front, but the cooperation projects that I've mentioned before, they, to some extent, of course, they work towards advancing legislation and policy in the countries in the beneficiary countries, to ensure the path towards ratification. So there are cooperation projects that are carried out in the Eastern Partnership countries, in Armenia, Azerbaijan, but also, of course, Ukraine. These are long-standing projects that have been around for quite some time, and a host of other countries. So there are many countries that the Council of Europe works with through the framework of the cooperation projects.
And is the budget adequate for this kind of work? Could you imagine that the countries face difficulties raising funds for creating awareness among the legal system and the law enforcement institutions?
Well, these projects are large-scale projects that are multi-year projects as well. So the funding that is made available is quite substantive to be able to ensure continuity, and it's embedded in action plans of the Council of Europe in many cases. So there's quite some long-term continuity that is observed. But as I said, this is another team that is working on those projects, and the core area of work that I'm responsible for is the monitoring of the standards of the Istanbul Convention.
And what are the challenges for countries so-called post-patriarchal, like the US, the United Kingdom, Switzerland? Because we always think, and it seems like there is this tendency to think, oh, these are developing countries, they have so much problems. Of course, they don't have the rule of law is not working. But in fact, as we have witnessed in the last couple of years, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Switzerland, and many so-called developed countries have problems. They don't have legislation in line with the Istanbul Convention. So what are the challenges in terms of, because people, you say here, oh, how is the question of women's rights in your country? And they say, oh no, Switzerland is very advanced. Oh no, we have legislation. But in fact, they don't either apply the legislation they have in terms of protecting women's rights, or they haven't even adopted yet the Istanbul Convention in their changed their legislation.
Well, I am not sure about the categorization as such, but Switzerland is, of course, a state party to the Istanbul Convention and is therefore therefore engaged in a number of obligations to bring its legislation and policy in line with the standards of the convention. And to what extent this is happening is, in fact, currently being evaluated by the independent group of experts that is mandated to look into the implementation, and the report on Switzerland will be out by the end of the year or already in the fall. So we will know exactly where Switzerland stands in implementing the Istanbul Convention then. But what is, of course, visible is that Grevio has, as the independent experts checking on the implementation of the convention, have seen um, shortcomings in its implementation in nearly all state parties. So it's they're not always in the same area, and much effort is, of course, already being done to actually ensure the implementation of the convention, and much progress has been made, notably in changing legislation in criminal law. Many new offences have been introduced that are entirely in line with the Istanbul Convention. So, and many countries are stepping up their funding for support services. They are spreading out the type of support services that exist. They're filling gaps, and this is really part of the added value of the Istanbul Convention. But but of course, with every report that Grevio issues, there's a set of recommendations or findings that are being made, and they show where the intention needs to be put, where further action needs to be taken, and this is visible in basically all state parties to the convention.
Thank you for watching the UN Brief, and don't forget to subscribe